How does a company that owns zero property become the biggest accommodation provider in the entire world? Well, today we're breaking down the incredible story, the blueprint of Airbnb.
But we're actually going to start this story near the end. Picture this. It's December 2020. Airbnb hits the stock market, and bam! A valuation of roughly $100 billion. Just like that, they're not just a startup anymore. They're an absolute titan of the travel industry.
I mean, $100 billion, that's just a crazy number. So how on earth did they get there? To figure that out, we've got to jump in our time machine and rewind the clock 13 years. We're going all the way back to a simple apartment in San Francisco where a rent payment was looming. All right, let's dig into how it all started. This origin story, it's become a true Silicon Valley legend, and honestly for a really good reason. So you've got two roommates, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia. And the situation is, well, it's pretty simple. They were broke, couldn't afford rent. But then they looked out their window and saw something interesting. A huge design conference had come to town, and literally every single hotel room was booked solid. And that's when a light bulb went off, sparking a pretty wild idea. So what'd they do? They literally bought a few air mattresses, tossed them on the living room floor, and whipped up a super basic website. They called it Air, Bed, and Breakfast. The offer was simple, $80 a night for a place to crash, and they'd even throw in breakfast. They decided to launch this whole thing at the massive South by Southwest Festival. And you know how many bookings they got? A grand total of 2. Yep, just 2. But hey, it was a start, right? And this right here, this is the real genius of it. This is what made it all click. See, they weren't just solving their own problem of paying rent. They stumbled onto this huge gap in the market. On one side, you have travelers who are just sick of these expensive cookie-cutter hotels. They want something real. On the other side, you've got homeowners with spare rooms, empty space that could be making them money. Airbnb was created to be the perfect bridge to connect those two sides. And you know, it was never just about finding a cheap place to sleep. Right from the get-go, their mission was so much bigger than that. It was all about creating connections, about experiencing a new culture, and about this idea that you could feel like you belong anywhere in the world. But look, going from a cool idea to a global mission like that, it's never easy. The road is bumpy. And for Airbnb, for a long time, it seriously looked like the whole thing was about to crash and burn. I mean, for months, the company was basically a zombie. Revenue was just flatlined. They were pulling in a measly $200 a week. Think about that. They were maxing out their credit cards, just trying to survive, watching this dream they had just slowly fade away. Okay, so this next part is where the story goes from struggling startup to absolute legend. To keep the lights on during the 2008 election, you know what they did? They designed and sold cereal boxes. Yeah, politically themed cereal, Obama-O's and Cat McCain's. And this totally crazy pivot, this act of pure desperation, it worked. It raised them 30 grand. Now, that money kept them alive for sure, but the bigger deal, it got them noticed by Paul Graham from the famous startup accelerator, Y Combinator. He saw this unkillable, cockroach-like hustle in them that you just can't teach. So the cereal was brilliant, right? A total lifeline. But it wasn't a business model. The real turning point, the thing that actually saved the company and set it on the right path, it didn't come from some fancy data analysis. Nope. It came from getting out of their apartment and flying to New York City to meet their users in person. And what they found when they got there was kind of obvious in hindsight, but totally game-changing. The photos on the listings were awful. I'm talking dark, blurry, taken on a flip phone bad. They made these great apartments look like, I don't know, crime scenes. So they had a thought, hey, what if better photos meant more people would book? So they did something crazy. They rented an expensive camera, flew to New York, and literally went door to door offering to take professional pictures of their hosts' places for free. The result? It was instant. Weekly revenue immediately doubled. It went from that sad $200 a week to $400 a week, just like that. And this whole experience created one of the most famous pieces of advice in the startup world. Do things that don't scale. In Silicon Valley, everyone is obsessed with automation, with things that can grow infinitely. But these guys, they did the exact opposite. They did something you could never do for millions of users. They became photographers. And it proved a critical lesson. When your business is built on trust, you have to get your hands dirty and perfect the user experience manually, long before you even dream of automating it. Okay, so that's a fantastic insight, but it leads to a big question, right?
How do you take a hands-on, unscalable trick like that and turn it into a strategy that can conquer the entire globe? How do you go from being a freelance photographer to having millions of listings?
Well, the answer was something called programmatic SEO. Sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It's basically a way to automatically create thousands upon thousands of web pages that are perfectly tailored for Google searches. So, think about any specific search you can imagine. Two-bedroom place in Paris near the Eiffel Tower, or a cozy cabin in Lake Tahoe with a hot tub. They built a system that created a custom web page for pretty much every single one of those searches.
And the results of this strategy? They are absolutely mind-blowing. They were able to spin up over 1 million of these targeted pages, and today, those pages bring in over 18 million visitors from Google every single month. It became their secret weapon, their #1 way of getting new customers. And the best part? It was essentially free.
This growth machine was the fuel for a business model that just completely turned the hotel industry on its head. Think about it. Traditional hotels need to own billions of dollars worth of buildings. Airbnb, they own 0 properties. Hotels sell you the same boring, standardized room. Airbnb, they offer you a one-of-a-kind experience. It was just a totally new way of looking at travel.
So, when you look back at this whole incredible story, from air mattresses and selling cereal to a $100 billion IPO, what are the big takeaways? What can we learn from the blueprint they left behind?
First, from the founders themselves, their story is just a masterclass. It shows you that the best ideas often come from solving your own problems, like, needing rent money. It teaches you to be so persistent that you're willing to sell cereal to survive. And, maybe most importantly, it screams at you to get out of the building and actually go talk to the people using your product.
And if you're trying to build any kind of platform business, here is the absolute golden rule from Airbnb's playbook. Trust is not a feature you add on later, it is the product. It's the entire foundation. Every single thing they built, from reviews that go both ways to verifying people's IDs, it was all designed to solve that one fundamental human challenge. How do you get two complete strangers to trust each other?
And, well, the results of following that blueprint pretty much speak for themselves. We're talking about almost 7 million listings. Over 800 million guests have used the platform. They're in basically every single country on the planet. It's a global phenomenon, and it all started with a couple of air mattresses on a living room floor.
When you boil it all down, maybe Airbnb's biggest innovation wasn't the website or the app. It was proving that you can use technology to create trust between strangers on a massive global scale. And that really leaves us with one big question to think about. What other old-school industries out there are just sitting, waiting to be completely reinvented by that exact same idea?